I chained the gate shut myself. Not with some flimsy lock, but industrial-grade steel, the kind we use to anchor freight ferries in a squall. Karen was on the other side screaming through her 3-0 veneers, demanding access to community property, which just so happened to be my private dock. I didn't flinch. Not when she threatened to call the Coast Guard. Not when she dragged out some rent-a-cop in tactical khakis. Not even when she screamed that I was committing a federal obstruction of waterway access. I simply leaned back against the hull of my boat, sipping coffee out of a mug that read, Lake Authority Director. They thought they were going to fine me, 700-0. Instead, I revoked every single one of their lake transport permits with a single email. Remind me, who the hell fines a man for parking his own boat on his own lake? It started with an envelope taped to my front door like a ransom note. The sun had already dipped behind the ridge when I got home, and I remember squinting at the thing because it was vibrating slightly in the breeze, just enough to make the red stamp on the corner look like blood. Final notice, it read, in bold block letters, above an official-looking crest I'd never seen before. The seal claimed to represent the Lakeshore Community HOA Compliance Division, which was curious for two very specific reasons. One, I wasn't part of any HOA, and two, there is no Lakeshore Community HOA Compliance Division. Not legally, not officially, not even on a volunteer basis. I tore the letter off the door and read it twice before I realized I was holding my breath. They were threatening me with a 700-0 fine for persistent non-compliance related to unauthorized marine equipment storage, which is OA language for, we don't like where you parked your boat. My boat, on my dock, floating in the lake that I owned outright, deeded and recorded in full with the county. I didn't lease lake access, I owned the lake. And not just the shoreline. I owned the watershed rights, the mineral rights, and through my logistics company I also controlled every legally recognized transport route across the water, which made this letter not just laughable but borderline hallucinogenic. I walked around to the dock, where my 34-foot patrol-cut modified ferry, the Perseverance, sat rocking gently in the water like it had for the past 10 years. Same slip, same mooring ropes, same privately licensed tag hanging from the bow that reads, in reflective blue, LKA1. I stood there for a moment staring at it, letting the twilight settle over my shoulders, before turning back toward the house. The absurdity hadn't quite kicked in yet. That came later, when I scanned the QR code at the bottom of the letter. It took me to a Google Doc. Not a secure portal, not an official site. A Google Doc. At the top was a digital header reading, Lakeshore Community Initiative, Enforcement Records. The margins were misaligned. The signature was a JPEG of a cursive font, and the Director of Compliance was listed as Karen Lennox, a woman I hadn't spoken to in over 6 months, mostly because the last time we'd interacted, she tried to claim I needed her approval to add solar panels to my boathouse. That was the first time I told her I didn't live under her jurisdiction. This was apparently the second round of her campaign to convince the world otherwise. The next morning, I drove down to the Lakeshore Commons, an area of shops and new construction about a mile from my property where Karen had taken to hosting informal community watch meetings, which I'm pretty sure were just an excuse to gossip while sipping flavored lattes. Sure enough, there she was, seated at a white plastic folding table like some off-brand gatekeeper of local authority. She had a little badge clipped to her blouse, the kind you get at Office Depot that said, HOA Committee Chair. No organization name, no seal, no legal backing. Just 4 little laminated letters that she wore like a crown. Karen, I said, holding up the crumpled notice. Care to explain this? She looked up slowly, eyes scanning the paper like she hadn't written it herself. Ah, yes, she said, folding her hands. That's regarding your vessel. We've received multiple complaints about it obstructing Lakeview property owners. Karen, I said, I'm going to ask this once. What HOA do you think I'm a part of? She blinked. Well, technically, you border the outer edge of the Lakeshore Community jurisdiction, which, under the amended proposals adopted by the committee— Stop, I cut in. There is no Lakeshore Community HOA. Not officially, not recognized by the county. Not recognized by me. This is my land, my dock, My lake. She had the audacity to smile. That's where you're mistaken. The lake is a shared visual asset under our Community Value Enhancement Clause. What the hell is a visual asset? I asked, jaw tightening. It's a concept we're trialing, she said. The idea that certain natural features contribute to communal well-being and therefore should be subject to regulation. I stared at her for a full 10 seconds. You're trying to tell me you can fine me $700,000 because you don't like looking at my boat? She didn't even flinch. It's not personal, she said. It's compliance. I turned and walked away before I lost my temper. But the next week, things got worse. I started seeing unfamiliar vehicles parked along the tree line near my property. A white SUV with tinted windows and no plates. A black Tacoma with a dash camera aimed directly at my boat ramp. One day I found a man in khakis and mirrored sunglasses pacing the edge of my property with a measuring wheel. When I stepped outside and called out to him, he ignored me. When I approached, he claimed he was documenting shoreline discrepancies for HOA records. I asked him what HOA he was working for. He wouldn't answer. I asked him if he was licensed to survey private land. He wouldn't answer that either. I told him to leave or I'd call the sheriff. He left without a word. The next day, another letter arrived. This one was slid under my door like it was a spy message. The letter accused me of deliberate obstruction of community scenic synergy and threatened to report my property to the county for environmental review. Attached was a blurry photo of my dock, my boat, and me sitting on a lawn chair sipping coffee. Someone was watching me. That night I installed motion-triggered floodlights, trip alarms, and infrared cameras. I wasn't afraid. I was insulted. Because they weren't just trespassing. They were pretending they had authority over me. Me, the man who built the first boat slip on this lake, who dredged the inlet, who founded the transport company that every single one of these HOA members relies on to move goods, construction materials, and groceries during flood season. But they didn't care. They saw a boat they didn't like and decided I had to go. I spoke with my neighbors. Most of them had no idea what was going on. Karen had quietly started collecting support signatures from new homeowners, misrepresenting her committee as a governing body. She'd forged at least 2 enforcement notices on fake letterhead. And now, she was weaponizing an entire fabricated legal structure to harass me. I checked the county assessor's office. No record of any HOA being registered under her name. No articles of incorporation. No tax ID. It was all a facade. A fake kingdom with a fake queen who thought she could control me with paper threats and suburban pageantry. She had no idea who she was playing with, and the game had just begun. It took less than a week for me to realize that what Karen was doing wasn't just harassment, it was a strategic land grab disguised as suburban etiquette. The woman hadn't just written up a fake citation and hoped I'd cave. She was laying the groundwork for a hostile annexation of power over property she had no legal right to. The signs were subtle at first. I'd lived on this land for nearly 20 years and had seen HOA wannabes come and go. Clipboard tyrants who lasted a season before burning out or getting laughed off the block. But this was different. Karen wasn't aiming for a typical HOA power trip. She was building an empire. I started digging, literally. Out in the shed, I pulled out old plats and boundary maps, the original surveyor's notes from when I purchased the property. I laid them out across my dining table and compared them to new zoning maps Karen had circulated online. Documents that conveniently cropped my parcel just enough to exclude my private dock from the property boundary and listed under Shared Communal Lake Access. I nearly laughed. My dock had been permitted and recorded with the county before half these homes were even built. So I called in a friend from county zoning, Danica, someone I'd worked with on a floodplain restoration project years back. She pulled up the digital files and confirmed it. There had been no official zoning changes in over a decade, but the public-facing map on the community site had been updated. That's not from us, she said. Looks like someone faked a zoning overlay. I asked who filed it. She checked. No records. It was just uploaded under a volunteer beautification committee account. Not even internal. Beautification committee. That was the name Karen used when she emailed neighbors about planting wildflowers near the storm drain. But according to Danica, The Beautification Committee wasn't recognized by any municipal body. It was a self-appointed title with zero jurisdiction, authority, or oversight. And yet, Karen had turned it into a de facto governing body through a combination of social manipulation, new resident confusion, and straight-up lying. She hosted meetings at the Lakeshore Pavilion and printed signs that mimicked the typography of real municipal departments. She called her volunteers inspectors. She posted enforcement bulletins that looked like official citations. And for most of the neighborhood, retirees, young families, and passive homeowners, it was enough. She kept the trash cans hidden, the flower beds symmetrical, the newsletter full of passive-aggressive grammar. People didn't question her because they liked the illusion of order. But that illusion was a trap. One of my neighbors, Alan, waved me down while I was refueling the ferry and asked if I was going to fight the eminent domain thing. I blinked. What eminent domain thing? He handed me a flyer Karen had posted to the community bulletin board. Expansion of shared use zones for enhanced waterfront harmony. It claimed that under recent regulatory shifts, all docks, launches, and shoreline structures within 100 feet of the main lake body would be reclassified as scenic easement infrastructure, meaning she was trying to steal everyone's docks. When I asked Alan why he didn't question it, he shrugged. She said it was approved by the county. That's when I knew I had to go deeper. I pulled every public filing with Karen's name on it. Turns out she'd been busy. Over the last 18 months, she'd registered 5 different civic volunteer organizations, all with vaguely official-sounding names: Lakeshore Enhancement Alliance, Neighborhood Waterway Trust, Shoreline Citizens Panel, the Visual Lakefront Committee, and of course, the infamous Beautification Committee. None of them had EINs. None of them were nonprofit registered. But they all had websites, PDF newsletters, and logos. She even had someone design fake seals for each one. The woman was running a bureaucracy of one, and she was using it to annex jurisdiction over everything she could see from her back patio. And yet, the moment I confronted her, again, in person, she treated me like I was the one causing chaos. I showed up at her so-called committee meeting with a stack of documents and county printouts. I waited until she finished her monologue about community visual standards before I stood and asked, "Karen, who authorized these jurisdictional overlays?" She didn't blink. "The committee." "What committee?" I asked. "You? Becky from across the street? And that one guy who just moved here from Denver?" She stiffened. "We're acting in the interest of the community." "Then why aren't you registered with the county? Why are your seals traced off the Department of Natural Resources logos?" Someone in the back snickered. Her eyes narrowed. "You're disruptive." "I'm informed," I said. "You're staging a soft coup and hoping no one notices." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You've already been cited for multiple violations. You're not even in good standing." "I'm not in your HOA," I said calmly. "I'm not part of any of this. And if you step 1 foot on my dock again, I will have you removed for trespassing." The meeting fell into an awkward silence. Karen tried to regain control by moving on to the next agenda item, but the room had shifted. I saw it. The unease, the doubt, the cracks. But that wasn't enough for her. No. She needed to reassert her power. So the next day, I found a neon orange sticker slapped across my dock's security gate. Dangerous structure. Condemned pending review. It was glued on with something like epoxy. Took me over an hour to scrape it off. And that night, I saw 2 more strange cars idling near the trailhead that led down to my ramp. They were filming. I could tell. Every now and then, a flash of a phone camera would glint in the dark. The next morning, a fake news blog called Lakeshore Neighbor Watch ran a post titled, "Unlicensed Watercraft Operation Threatens Lake Safety." The photo was of my boat. The article was anonymous. I traced the domain, registered to an LLC in another state. The address on file? Karen's vacation home in Colorado. That's when I knew she wasn't just playing pretend anymore. She was escalating into propaganda, gaslighting the neighborhood, inventing her own reality. So I took my response to the next level. I set up full perimeter surveillance around my dock, including a set of high-definition PTZ cams with facial recognition. I began recording every interaction, every visitor, every false claim. And then I started building a file, a real one, legal, federal. I wasn't just protecting my boat, I was documenting fraud. Every forged notice, every false domain, every claim of HOA authority. And I wasn't the only one she'd targeted. I reached out to neighbors who'd gotten quiet. One had been pressured into voluntarily removing a gazebo they'd built 6 years ago. Another was told their driveway violated aesthetic cohesion protocols and was threatened with legal action if they didn't repaint their shutters. These weren't violations. They were intimidation tactics. Karen's empire wasn't built on rules. It was built on fear. But she picked the wrong property to try and dominate. I don't play by HOA politics. I play by the rule of law. And if she wanted to wage war over who controlled the lake, then she was going to learn what happens when you try to pull rank on the man who owns the water. The harassment didn't creep in. It slammed down like a thunderclap. One day, I was just a man being pestered by a fake HOA tyrant. The next, it was open season on my property, my business, and anyone who stood next to me. It started small, passive, like a background buzz. A complaint was filed with the county about excessive industrial noise coming from my dock at 3:12 a.m., which was fascinating because the only thing running at 3:12 a.m. that night was my wind chimes. Then came the letter from the Department of Environmental Quality stating they'd received multiple anonymous tips regarding unlicensed fuel discharge and improper waste containment around my marina. I read the accusation 3 times and laughed. The fuel station I operated on the lake had been fitted with a triple containment spill prevention system, which I designed myself. And all runoff from my property was already filtered through a reed bed mitigation channel that exceeded state environmental standards by 40%. I'd been the one who helped write the damn regional compliance code back in 2014. But that didn't stop the letters. 3 days later, a county inspector arrived, clipboard in hand, mumbling about an anonymous escalation regarding submerged debris. I offered him a coffee, showed him the environmental audit reports, and walked him through the drone footage of the lake bed I scanned every 72 hours for barge routing. The guy left half ashamed, muttering that he'd be filing "no issue found," but I could see it on his face. Someone was using every bureaucracy they could find to build a paper wall around me. Then, it stopped being paperwork. My barge, the Perseverance, came back from a night run with a long, deliberate gouge along her starboard side, 6 feet of sheared paint, and a torn cleat that looked like someone had slammed a prop anchor into it. No one saw anything, no witnesses, no incident reports. Then it happened again. My smaller skiff came back with a cracked rudder, clean, sharp, unnatural. Within the week, 2 more of my vessels were tagged with fabricated inspection holes by the lake's regional transport desk. And then came the death blow. My permit to operate the marina was revoked without explanation, just an email. No warning, no investigation, no recourse. I drove straight to the county office and demanded a meeting. Turns out, the complaint came from Lakeshore Community Civic Trust, citing unsafe mechanical operations, lack of emergency response planning, and, my personal favorite, unmonitored use of hydraulic lifts by potentially untrained personnel. Every single claim was fabricated. I had logs, certifications, safety drills documented to the second. But the clerk behind the desk just shrugged. "Sorry," she said. "We're obligated to investigate when community safety groups raise a flag." That's when it clicked. Karen had created these fake groups not just to intimidate me, but to weaponize protocol. She didn't need the law on her side. She just needed to drag me through the machinery of it, over and over, until I bled money and time. Meanwhile, the whispers started. Neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street. Local businesses started canceling orders from my transport company, claiming too much heat. One of my employees, Carlos, a dock supervisor, called me after hours and said he found a note under his windshield wiper that read, "Better find a quieter job before the lake gets noisy." That same week, someone dumped 2 contractor bags full of rotting fish, beer cans, and oil-soaked rags across the top of my private launch ramp. There was a sticky note taped to the mess that said in uneven Sharpie, Hazardous contamination site. Shutdown pending. I reviewed the camera footage. A beat-up Ford Expedition with dark plates, tinted windows, and one broken taillight. 2 individuals in hoodies. Couldn't make out faces, but their timing was precise. Just after 2 a.m., right after my perimeter lights did their scheduled test cycle. It was sloppy, but planned. A false flag dump job meant to trigger another inspection. And it did. This time the county sent 2 men in white coveralls with clipboards, air quality monitors, and digital tablets. I didn't even bother arguing. I just handed them a folder labeled Contamination Response Drill 2022. They were out in 20 minutes. No violations, no further action. But the stink lingered. Not the fish, the strategy. Karen's real war wasn't with my boat, it was with my credibility, my business, my name. She wanted to make me radioactive. She wanted people to associate me with chaos. And she was damn near succeeding, until she made the mistake of thinking I was just some proud landowner defending his turf. What she didn't know, what no one in the HOA had any idea about, was that my entire dock network was wired into a military-grade surveillance array. Not because I was paranoid, but because I was once under contract to design waterborne threat detection systems for FEMA after Hurricane Katrina. My property, especially the waterfront, had been my test bed. Under the surface of the lake sat motion-sensing buoys, equipped with thermal detection. On my rooftops were low-profile PTZ cameras that could read license plates at half a mile. And everything streamed live into a secure server locked behind a triple-encrypted firewall. That's right. Karen had been pulling strings while standing on a stage built out of my data, so I went back through the logs. Every drive-by, every strange car, every late-night shadow pacing near my boathouse. I pulled heat signatures, facial approximations, license plate reflections. I watched them plot and sneak and film and lie. And every second of it was recorded, time-stamped, and admissible in court. I started compiling the footage, clipping it, cataloging it, matching time codes to the dates the county claimed to receive anonymous complaints. And wouldn't you know it, on every single date, there was a match, a vehicle, a trespasser, a connection. My dock had become the most surveilled stretch of water in the entire county, and they walked straight into it like amateurs. One night, while reviewing infrared logs, I caught something different. A figure moving deliberately at the tree line, kneeling near my fence line, placing what looked like, at first, a trail cam. But when I zoomed in, it was a microphone. Directional. Mounted on a stake, pointed straight at my boathouse. Audio surveillance. Illegal without a warrant. The next morning I found the device, ripped it out of the dirt, took it apart. It was tagged inside with a sticker. Property of LCCT. The same LLC Karen had used for her phony news blog. I didn't call the police, not yet. I called my lawyer, a real one. Federal level maritime litigation specialist. And together we began building a case not just for harassment, but for conspiracy, fraud, and unlawful surveillance. Meanwhile, Karen kept pushing, kept faking, kept rallying her little storm of paper and paranoia. She didn't realize the storm she was standing in was mine, and it was about to hit. It was time to stop reacting and start orchestrating. No more waiting for the next phony complaint, or trash dump, or late-night trespass. I wasn't interested in playing Karen's game anymore. I was going to make her play mine. But first, I had to play it cool. I showed up at the next HOA meeting wearing jeans, boots, and a windbreaker with the faded logo of my transport company. Casual. Unassuming. I brought no threats, no declarations, just a thermos of black coffee, a yellow legal pad, and a pocket recorder. Karen didn't even blink when I entered. She saw me as the neighborhood problem child, the cranky loner with too much land and too much attitude. She didn't know I had already retained counsel, filed an injunctive relief petition with the county court, and submitted 3 formal complaints to the Office of Environmental Protection regarding the illegal committee activities her group had been engaged in. I just sat there, nodding along while she lectured about visual conformity protocols for docks, and non-harmonious nautical themes in shoreline paint schemes. That last one made me raise my hand. Just to clarify, are you enforcing color schemes on privately owned boathouses? Karen gave a tight smile. We are strongly recommending compliance for aesthetic continuity. I nodded. And who authorized this aesthetic continuity program? The committee, she said. Which committee? I asked. The Lakeshore Beautification and Property Stewardship Subcouncil. That's not a registered HOA, correct? I added. Her nostrils flared. We're in the process of formalizing our charter. So currently, I continued, you're operating with no official standing and still issuing citations and fines? A murmur rippled through the room. Karen's eyes narrowed. Are you here to contribute or to disrupt? Just trying to understand, I said calmly, clicking my pen and jotting a note that I knew would make her paranoid. I recorded the entire meeting. Every vague threat, every nod of agreement, every moment Karen implied legal authority she didn't possess. Afterward, I shook hands with neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. Asked polite questions. Offered to help with shoreline cleanups. I wasn't the outcast anymore. I was the neighbor who'd been attacked and was still showing up with a smile. And the next morning, I struck. Quietly, surgically. I emailed the County Water Authority a formal notice of revocation for the temporary shared dock access permits Karen's group had been issuing. Under the lake charter, which I owned, I had full control over mooring, launch access, and water-based activities. Karen had been giving permission she didn't have to people who didn't know better. I made it clear that any continued use of the lake under fraudulent permit authority would result in civil and possibly criminal enforcement. Within 48 hours, 5 events were canceled. A birthday party, a charity paddleboard race, a lakeside yoga class that had booked part of the shoreline without checking who owned it. Karen tried to act like it was a coincidence. She posted a Facebook update blaming county red tape. But I saw the shift. The emails from her slowed. The smugness in her eyes dimmed. That was just phase 1. Phase 2 involved the Department of Environmental Regulation. I submitted a 47-page complaint, complete with time-stamped footage and GPS data, detailing how Karen's so-called beautification projects had resulted in unlicensed plant removal, illegal shoreline stabilization, and unauthorized chemical use. She'd hired landscapers to spray herbicides near the lake edge, right into protected wetlands. My complaint triggered an immediate review. The county put her projects on hold. The landscaper was fined. Her committee was barred from holding any new initiatives until the investigation concluded. Phase 3 was legal. My attorney, Ms. Rhonda Lister, a maritime compliance bulldog with the sharpest legal mind this side of the Mississippi, filed a preliminary motion for injunctive relief. The document laid out the fraud, the trespassing, the fake permits, the illegal surveillance. It included Exhibits A through Q, screenshots, audio clips, anonymous statements, license plate stills. We weren't suing yet. We were just drawing the line. Officially. Quietly. With the power of law. Karen didn't get the news until 3 days later, when she tried to organize a Lake Unity paddle parade, only to find her digital registration form redirected to a cease and desist notice filed with the local registrar. She tried to bluff her way through it, of course. Sent out emails. Claimed bureaucratic confusion. But the panic had started to show. Her confidence cracked when 2 of her committee members resigned in the same week. One of them emailed me privately to apologize. Said he didn't realize she was fabricating legal backing until it got out of hand. Then came the real blow. I filed with the Coastline Safety Board to revoke provisional access to the lake for all non-certified recreational watercrafts operating under unlicensed event coverage. That's a mouthful. What it meant, in plain English, was this. If your lake event didn't have real insurance, a real permit, and a real emergency response plan, your boat wasn't allowed on my water. I wasn't doing it to be mean. I was doing it because Karen had built her fake power on fake paperwork, and now I was cutting off the paper. Within 10 days, I had shut down 6 of her scheduled events. The public sentiment shifted. People weren't mad at me. They were mad that they'd been lied to. That they'd followed her made-up rules, paid her fake citations, re-landscaped their yards based on mandatory color swatches, and now found out she had no actual power to do any of it. Karen tried to rally. Posted a furious video calling me a dangerous radical with delusions of grandeur. She said I was weaponizing bureaucracy to bully community volunteers. It got 127 views. I posted a response. Just the county land deed, the lake charter, and the email from the Coastline Safety Board confirming the revocations. It got 0 shares. People started asking questions. Started wondering what else Karen had faked. One woman, Amy, from down the road, posted screenshots of fake violations Karen had cited her for, including one for non-compliant garden gnome coloration. That went viral in the neighborhood. The comments were brutal, and while Karen tried to hold her ground, it was clear the sand was shifting beneath her. I kept my mouth shut. Let the facts speak. Let the paper trail drown her in her own nonsense. And while she scrambled to save face, I kept filing. I wasn't the enemy anymore. I was the gatekeeper, the one with the real permits, the real data, the real power. Karen had declared war on me, thinking I was a homeowner. She didn't realize I was the reason the lake existed in its current form. The man who charted the channels, who designed the mooring grid, who built the safety response protocol that every lakefront home relied on. She thought I was an obstacle to bulldoze. Now she was starting to realize I was the foundation. And that foundation was preparing for a final reckoning. One she would not survive. It started with steel and silence. One early morning, while the neighborhood still slept and the lake shimmered untouched beneath a curtain of fog, my crew arrived. They came in 3 black trucks with no decals, just like I'd ordered. What they unloaded wasn't landscaping equipment or construction tools. It was prefabricated, reinforced steel fencing, 10 feet tall. Galvanized, designed to withstand hurricane-force wind and saltwater corrosion. Over the next 10 hours, my private contractors erected a solid barrier around my entire marina, boat ramp, and shoreline access. Every entry point from the trailhead, every corner of public easement Karen had used to stage her little power plays, sealed. I installed surveillance towers, biometric access gates, and live monitored cameras connected directly to my private security contractor's central hub. My dock became a fortress. The final touch? A laser-etched steel sign that read, "Private property, no HOA access. Violators will be prosecuted." But that wasn't even the revenge. That was the line. The real reckoning came next. On the same day the wall went up, I issued a notice of usage termination to every entity that had accepted a dock access permit from Karen's fake HOA subcommittees. The notice cited trespass, fraud, and environmental noncompliance. 47 vessels lost their lake privileges overnight. That included every kayak, canoe, pontoon, paddleboard, and sailboat registered under Lakeshore Community Events. Their permits were no longer recognized. I had voided them using the legal authority granted to me by the original shoreline deed, which designated me as the exclusive administrator of commercial and recreational water traffic on the lake. Then I went a step further. I sent individual letters to each participant who had previously rented lake gear through the HOA's seasonal pool, reminding them politely that their craft were now illegally moored and subject to impound. I gave them 72 hours to remove them. 17 didn't. So, on the 4th day, I hired a barge crew. We towed every unauthorized vessel into the center of the lake and moored them in a floating impound lot, bright yellow buoys marking their location like a crime scene. Karen's precious HOA rented jet ski, the one she booked for her daughter's birthday Lake Princess photo shoot, was among them. I heard the scream from across the water when she saw it bobbing gently at the impound ring. That scream, that moment of helpless fury, was when I knew she finally understood. The lake wasn't hers to rule. It was mine to defend. But I wasn't done. I had spent weeks building my legal file, cross-referenced, time-stamped, color-coded. I had emails, photos, video, anonymous witness statements, notarized affidavits. I scheduled a presentation at the county commissioner's monthly hearing. When the day came, I wore a plain gray suit, no tie, no flair. I brought a USB drive and 3 binders, and I let the evidence do the talking. I played video of Karen faking citations, directing fake compliance inspectors, and lying to new homeowners about mandatory dues. I showed screenshots of her fraudulent websites, doctored documents, and digital manipulation of county zoning maps. Then I brought up the environmental report, how she'd dumped herbicides, manipulated stormwater routes, and instructed unlicensed landscapers to cut into protected wetland buffer zones. The county chairwoman's face turned from boredom to horror in under 10 minutes. When I was done, I passed around copies of the injunctive order, the cease and desist notices, and the Federal Communications Act complaint I'd filed regarding the illegal surveillance microphones found on my property. The room fell into a hush so thick it felt like weather. Karen had shown up too, flanked by 2 of her remaining committee loyalists. Her face was drawn tight with defiance, but I saw the cracks. I saw her lips twitch when the footage of her bragging about not needing a permit because I'm the permit played on the screen. And I saw the moment the county clerk leaned over to whisper to the chairman while pointing at Karen's seating chart, a quiet confirmation that something irreversible was happening. After the meeting, a reporter from the local NBC affiliate cornered me in the parking lot. He asked if I'd like to comment on the Lake Power grab story. I just said, people deserve to know when they're being lied to. And they deserve better than bullies in blazers pretending to be the law. That night, my inbox exploded. County environmental boards, real HOAs asking how to prevent similar scams, local residents thanking me. One woman even sent a handwritten card that said, "I painted my shutters blue because she told me to. You got them back for me." The next week, the hammer fell. The Lakeshore Beautification Committee, along with its fake umbrella groups, was stripped of any nonprofit consideration by the state. The Attorney General's office opened a formal inquiry into charitable fraud, zoning manipulation, and unlicensed data collection. Karen's home was served with legal papers, not by me, but by the state. Her committee accounts were frozen. Her fake HOA newsletter went offline, and then she resigned. In a Facebook post drenched in martyrdom, she claimed she was stepping back for the good of the community and cited toxic individuals with vendettas for her departure. But the neighborhood wasn't fooled anymore. The comments weren't supportive. They were furious. Residents wanted refunds, wanted apologies, wanted answers. And Karen? She disappeared. Moved out within 3 weeks. For sale sign. Empty house. Gone. That weekend, I held a BBQ on the lakeshore. No gates, no walls. Just smoked brisket, homemade lemonade, kids chasing dragonflies near the dock, and country music playing from the speakers tied to the boathouse. I printed a sign in all caps. No hoe permitted. Just neighbors. Nearly the entire lakeside showed up. People brought chairs, coolers, casseroles. Someone made t-shirts that said, "The lake is free again." And when the sun dipped low behind the trees and painted the water gold, I stood on the dock with a coffee mug and felt the silence stretch wide and deep. Not tense, not watchful. Free. The lake was mine again. Not because I fought harder, but because I outlasted every lie and exposed every fraud. And this time, it's fenced, not with steel, not with law, but with truth. Try breaking through that.